There is a saying, if you scratch beneath the surface, you will find a really nice person. This reading from about the Syrophoenician woman has far more to it than her begging Jesus for help and Jesus being abrupt with her. It's like an iceberg that we only see 10% of, and the rest is beneath the surface. There's a lot to see in this story of Jesus' encounter with a woman from the Gentile region of Tyre and Sidon. Likewise, there's a lot to see in Warwick Thornton's film called The New Boy. So let us peek beneath the surface and see something of the biblical story and Thompson's movie. I am using the reading set for today from Matthew's Gospel of Jesus. And the first thing I want to point out is that Matthew speaks of the Canaanite woman, where Mark's Gospel speaks of the Syrophoenician woman. The problem is that there are no Canaanites alive in Jesus' time. So Matthew is using a literary device to make a theological point. But I'm not going to go there this morning. I just want to note that, let you tease that out. The writers of the Gospels and the epistles in the Newer Testament wrote for communities. Matthew is writing to a Jewish Christian community. Peter, Paul, and the rest were Jews. But some of the Jews who followed Jesus wanted to hold on to all of the Jewish tradition. And it may well be that one of the traditions they wanted to hold on to was that they were the chosen people, full stop. And the story of the Syrophoenician woman addresses this issue. It tells us that Jesus came first to the house of Israel, but not exclusively so. Even though Jesus was to bring the Jews first the good news that he was bringing, he also was there for the Gentiles. And this account tells us that Jesus has more compassion and inclusion than his disciples who wanted to send the woman away. And Jesus saw her faith was as great as his disciples. Jesus is both compassionate and inclusive. And I want to quickly address Jesus' apparent rudeness and his reference to the Gentiles as dogs. We Aussies read this story through the lens of our culture, and we have a gentle culture. There are many cultures in the world which are abrupt and direct with each other. I think we often fail to recognize that Jesus lived in a far more abrupt and direct culture. And so we need to be careful about rushing to a conclusion that he was rude. I am not sure the woman would have experienced Jesus as rude. So Jesus' encounter with the Syrophoenician woman uncovers the intended inclusivity of the gospel, which was prophesied in the books of Isaiah. Isaiah ends a collection of writings with a wonderful statement that all will return to the temple, Gentiles as well. And the Gentiles, some of them, will become priests, an order reserved only for one of the tribes. Seeing beneath the surface and finding more is certainly true of Warwick Thornton's movie, The New Boy. I don't know how many of you have seen it. How many of you have seen that film? There's a few of you. Well, I'll try and tell the story. The film critic Luke Buckmaster wrote, "Driven by desire for symbolic heft, the new boy becomes a cryptic and borderline impenetrable noodle scratcher stuffed full of heavy religious imagery." It doesn't sound very exciting, does it? And I'm not quite sure what Buckmaster is really saying about a noodle scratcher, but anyway, something for me to learn. Another critic, Jim Shembry, wrote, beautiful, lyrical, and tinged with magical realism. The third feature from Warwick Thornton is a delicate exploration of faith and the collision of cultures. The fear is that it will go the way of so many Australian films and quietly sink into the swamp. I must say I share Jim Shembry's view. The film begins with a struggle between a policeman and a renegade Aboriginal boy, who is eventually subdued and delivered late at night to an orphanage in a large Hessian bag. Sister Eileen, who happens to be Kate Blanchett, is the nun running the orphanage in this outback place. She receives the boy at night. The cleric in charge has recently died, but Sister Eileen is concealing the news to run the orphanage herself, with the assistance of Sister Mum and a farmhand, George. And I take George to be part Aboriginal. This boy doesn't speak, so they don't know what his name is. So they refer to him as the new boy. We are alerted to the new boy's speciality when he finally lies down underneath his bed at night, and he lies there and sparks come between his hands and he calms down. It is a poetic film, so images are used in a poetic, exciting way. The story unfolds with a series of quite bizarre events where the new boy shows he has spiritual powers, but in the end he is converted to Christianity and baptized. And at that point he loses his spiritual or magic powers. The initial interpretation of this film is how an Aboriginal child has been indoctrinated into the Christian faith and loses part of their Aboriginal spirituality and culture. At this point, the viewer sees the dark side of colonialism. It is clear from the film that the new boy has a deep understanding of Christ. I find this a cheap shot at the Roman Catholic Church in the first place, and in the second place, Christianity. Albeit there's some truth in that interpretation. What I always stick with when we criticize these missionaries for their colonial methodology, and it is there, and their indoctrination, and it is there, that those who were indoctrinated, those first peoples, those native peoples of other countries, saw beneath all that, and they accepted this Christ. And Christ Jesus means so much to them in spite of the way Christ was brought to them. Thornton's production portrays how fixed motions of what is right blinds us to more truth. Rigidity in faith prejudices our understanding of others' spirituality. And it's a solid message. But there's more to this film. The new boy is a mystery figure. He stands up without words but actions to the bullies, befriends those on the edge of the boys in this orphanage. When he gets an extra plate of porridge, he doesn't go to the table and eat it himself. He goes and gives it to one of the hungry boys who he knows is still hungry. When a boy who has been very unkind to him is bitten by a snake and apparently dies, the new boy goes and sucks the poison out of his system, and his life is spared. When another boy gets badly burnt in a fire, the new boy goes and heals miraculously the wounds. Then there's a major turn in this film. Sister Eileen has ordered a crucifix. a life-size crucifix for the bare chapel. It arrives and is assembled and erected in the sanctuary. So much joy for Sister Eileen. She's so glad to have this crucifix there. The new boy is intrigued. He knows Christ is important. But when the Christ figure is nailed to the wooden cross, the new boy feels the pain. Let me pause here for a moment. In recent weeks, I've been fed a very good book about Aboriginal people by Tyson Yorkapunka. There I learnt Aboriginal spirituality sees life in all things, even inanimate things like rocks, and understands truth only in its relationship to others, to people and nature. In contrast, Westerners compartmentalize life and understand truth in isolation from other things. The crucifix is seen by Sister Eileen as a representative of the dogma of her faith. The new boy sees the crucifix as a living thing, revealing Christ. So when the Christ is nailed to the cross, the new boy feels the pain. The new boy experiences the stigmata. His palms bleed. The viewer is not sure if the new boy has taken out the nails and self-inflicted the stigmata, or they have just come. But later on, he experiences that again. The new boy's hands are bandaged by Sister Eileen, and she sees something special in him. And the following scenes are quite beautiful, childlike, innocent, but they are profoundly significant. The new boy takes the crucified figure off the cross. He pulls out the nails, and he picks this giant image, much bigger than him, and he drags it into the yard, and he props it up, and he takes his bandages off, and he bandages the hands of the crucified Jesus image. He then gets food and feeds Jesus. He sees life in what we would see as a dead image. Of course, when Sister Eileen has discovered the crucifix has been removed and she finds where it is, she is horrified. So the crucifix is taken back, resurrected, or rather reassembled. And as the Christ figure is once more nailed onto the wooden cross, the new boy's hands bleed, and he sees the tears in the eyes of the Christ figure. After the crucifix is installed, the new boy climbs onto the crucifix, to the horror of Sister Eileen, and hugs it with emotion and passion. And she mutters something like this in the film, "I can't do that." It's a scene which leaves one thinking, who really loves Christ Jesus, the person? The film ends with the new boy being baptized and getting a proper name, and this results in the new boy losing his spirituality. But the final scene comes. They're feasting, can't remember the festivity, but George, the farmhand, has organised a foot race for the boys. He's made some wire dollies for the boys to push, and they'll push it up the road, up to the hill, and then turn round. So they go off on the race. The new boy's also there, but he doesn't run immediately. He falters. You can see his spirit seems to be broken. And then he's encouraged to run, and he begins to run slowly, and then a little bit faster, and a little bit faster. Then he catches up, and he moves ahead of those other boys, and he keeps on running. And they get to the top of the hill where they could turn around, but he doesn't turn around. He keeps running, and they say, turn around, but he keeps running. And Sister Eileen shouting, turn around, and George saying, keep running. So you have these two Turn around, keep running. I'm watching the scene and wondering, is this a resurrection scene as a new boy finds his life and wanders off? And I'm left wondering, who is the new boy? He does a lot of things that Jesus did. Is he the Christ? He certainly shows Christ-like behavior, unfettered from the dead tradition of the living. I share the story with you today in the light of the gospel, its inclusiveness and its compassion. We can be bound by our dogma. Now, Uniting Church people don't have dogma, but we do have tradition. I'd like us to reflect on our love and our affection for our traditions and the prejudices we inherit with them. And furthermore, I think we need to cultivate our spirituality, which is able to see the living Spirit of God in life, breathing over the waters, breathing life into matter and us, renewing us. And we would do ourselves a great service if we pause to reflect on Aboriginal spirituality. Thornton's film calls us to reflect on what's beneath the surface.